Hello, this is Alberto Govea. I'm your host for ¿Qué pasa today? Our show is being brought to you by Our Voice, Nuestra Voz de Texas. On the show today, we have Luis Castillo. He's going to talk to us about an incident that happened when he was a police officer in Laredo. He actually wrote an article for our publication called The Little Girl. And so I'm going to talk to Luis Castillo about that today. On a book, is that correct?
Yes. I'm still working on the book. It's kind of a ongoing thing because I'm working on a part-time basis. But hopefully, I wanna complete my first draft by the end of the year.
Sounds good. What is the title of the book?
The book is 9 Lives, Memoirs of a Border Town Street Cop.
And so, and that's one of the reasons that I called you, or the main reason I called you today, is because you wrote an article on Nuestra Voz, Our Voice, and the title of that article was The Little Girl, and we had a lot of feedback from our readers. It seemed to really touch a nerve with some of our readers. So I want to talk to you a bit about that. I want to take you back to that night. I understand it was New Year's Eve or New Year's Day, early when all this happened?
Yes. Saturday night was New Year's Eve, and I was working the graveyard shift, and on Sunday morning was already New Year's.
Yeah.
So I was ready to get off my shift when about 20 minutes before I got off my shift, we got the call. Mm-hmm. So it happened back in, I believe it happened January the 1st, 1984.
So it's been a while, but it really burned into your memory.
Oh, yes. As a matter of fact, what prompted me to write about it was that and I think it was something that as I get older, maybe my suppression mechanism, it gets weaker. So I met with my with a psychologist over at the VA hospital, and he suggested that, he said I was suffering from a PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder.
Sure.
And I told him that oftentimes when I would talk to people about the story about the little girl, that I couldn't hold back and break down.
Sure.
And he said, well, I suggest you write about it and you talk about it, as a way of trying to be therapeutic. And that's where I got the idea about writing a book about my police experiences, because the little girl actually it's like maybe one story of several stories I want to highlight in the book. And,
sure. I understand.
And there's several incidents that I was exposed to, that I witnessed, that kind of just haunt me. They just stay there forever. And
I tell you what, without getting too far away from the article, I will say that there's certainly a large amount of people that have worked as police officers and have that committed suicide. I mean, what do you attribute that to?
That's something that I had four of my former police officers that I worked with, have committed suicide so far.
Wow.
4. Wow. And I think that's a high number.
Sure, it is.
And I think that I don't know. I tried to put myself in their place and see how they view the world that they're into, that makes them take away their lives. And stress, anxiety, all the things that they witness, which I think recently the Star Telegram interviewed me on that subject matter about first offenders committing suicide. And I told them that I felt that death is relatively easy. What's hard is living.
I understand.
And I think that's what I think that's how they see it. People that commit, those first responders, my friends that commit suicide, you know, that theirs was easy. You stop to think about it, just a split second. You know, you can take away your life in a split second. But
sure, living. Yeah, because I guess you get the feeling that it's never going to get better.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
and you lose hope, and and once you lose hope, well, it's kind of hard to continue living without hope.
Yeah. Well, this officer, one of the chapters that I'm going to write on the book is called "The Long Ranger." This police officer, he was 22 years old, and he committed suicide. He shot himself in the head.
Wow!
In front of his estranged wife. And he blew his head apart, so that was the very first one. And then later on, a lieutenant did, and a captain, and then most recently, a sergeant that I worked with, he also committed suicide, And I think that's a high number of people that I knew. That the people that I used to work with, have committed suicide, And, going back to the little girl episode, one possible scenario, because I stopped and think about it, when it happened, the what ifs. This man had shot his wife, and we were there with our guns aimed at him, and he was distraught. And one if was, what if he wanted to commit suicide by police?
Well, yeah, and that's certainly a thing, is it not? Can I ask you something? Can you describe the scene when you first walk in the house? And I know that that's certainly a very dangerous time because you don't know what you're walking into. Can you, before you get to him, can you kind of describe the scene for our listeners?
Yes. We got there. We got the call around 6:40. We got there a few minutes later. They sent 2 police cars. I was, usually, domestic problem, because the call came in as a domestic disturbance. And usually the standard procedure is to send 2 officers to the scene. We got there. We walked through the front yard. Everything was quiet. The whole neighborhood was quiet. And we knocked on the door. There was no answer. And the screen door was unlocked. And the front door was open. So we went in. We announced ourselves, we said, police. And the living room and the dining room was littered with, just paper plates and beer cans and mixed drink glasses, there was a party had been going on. But then in the kitchen, we heard some noise. We heard like someone was crying. So we walked into the kitchen, further down the house, and we walked right into this man that had this gun in his hand and crying. And he could have shot us as we walked in, because we weren't expecting that. We were not expecting that. And he was just swaying from side to side, and there was a lady laying in front of his feet, face up, and there was a little girl kneeling next to the lady, kind of trying to wake her up. And of course, we pointed our guns at the man, and we asked him to drop the gun. We didn't know what was going on, and he had the gun in his right hand. He was pointing it down, but if he would have even dared try to raise the gun, we would open fire.
Sure.
And then he didn't drop the gun. We asked him twice. I yelled at him, drop the gun. My partner yelled at him. We both had our guns aimed at him, and we were just about 12, 15 feet apart. It was kind of a close encounter. In police training, they're trained that when you shoot center mass in the chest. Sure. So my aim was at center mass. The little girl, all of a sudden, without warning or anything, just stood up. She faced me, and she got in front of the man who turned out to be her dad. And then she kind of wrapped her arms backwards, like kind of protecting him. And then, so my aim now was at her forehead. My handgun aim was at her head. Was at her forehead. So I had to raise I elevated my aim towards the man's head, because when you're in a gunfire, Alberto, and your adrenaline is pumping, and you pull the trigger, those shots go everywhere. It's not like when you're doing some firing at the firing range where you practice. So you squeeze the trigger and you hit the top. In the heat of things, you just squeeze the trigger, then you pull the triggers, and you may not hit the target. So, anyways, I raised my aim towards his forehead to make sure that in case I had to open fire, I don't hit the little girl. And I pulled my trigger back.
Intense moment. Wow, I can't imagine.
Yeah. Oh yeah. And I pulled my trigger back. And the little girl starts yelling, no, and then my partner yells at the man to drop the gun. We're going to shoot you, and it was real tense. Everything happened in a matter of, I would say, 2-3 minutes. It takes more time to tell the story than the duration of when it happened. And she started yelling no, and then the man was still crying, all distraught, and then he finally dropped the gun. I'm glad he did. It was a very intense, hair-raising moment.
Mm-hmm.
And he dropped the gun. My partner approached him. We handcuffed him. We called for backup detectives, crime scene. I checked the lady laying down. She was unconscious. I couldn't see no blood in the front. She had a small bullet wound in her top right breast. There was no blood in the front nor the back. Mm-hmm. So I assumed that she must have bled internally. Yeah. And then what really, really, really got real deep was when the little girl tapped my shoulder. I was kneeling down, attending to the lady, and she tapped my shoulder, and she asked me, "Is my mommy okay?" And I just had to get up, with a lump in my throat, trying to control my emotions. I had to tell her that her mom was dead. That was really, real hard. And then the cry that she allowed, it was very, very intense. That to this day, I think I still think about it, and I often wonder whatever happened to the little girl. She's a grown woman now.
Exactly. So let me ask you: how about the man? I'm sorry, Luis, but let me ask you this. I know that you arrested him that night. What happened to that little girl that night since you arrested her dad?
I left the scene. This happened about almost 10 o'clock. I left the scene around maybe about 8:30, 9 o'clock. The detectives take over. They called the justice of the peace to pronounce her dead at the scene. So we have to wait for the JP. And I don't really know what happened to the little girl. I think there were some relatives there, or that took her. The thing is about police work, Alberto. That yes. you go to so many calls every day or every night. You go and you deal with the call, and then you go on to the next one, and then next one, that you never know what happens later on. If you don't call you to court to go testify or something, you never know what happens. Wow. I remember that morning I went home, and I was emotionally and mentally exhausted by the whole incident.
Sure.
I got home. I was single at that time. I took up my gun belt, my boots. I left my uniform on. I sat down in the bed, and I started crying. I guess I must have told it. I just so sorry for the whole thing was just very heartbreaking. I fell asleep, and I didn't wake up till almost 6 o'clock in the afternoon. And then later on that night, I went back to work to another shift, and it's a whole new shift. And you don't think about. It stays with you forever, the experience. But you look forward to the next call, the next call, the next call. So it's so I never did find out what happened to the little girl. You won't believe this, but I still have a daughter in Laredo that I go visit every now and then. And when I go visit, I don't know, for some reason, I pass through the house where it happened.
Wow.
I just pass through there just to kind of maybe I'll see a lady, and sometimes I think about looking up the little girl